Welcome back. We're here doing a nice little river scene here along an embankment in Kingsville, Ontario. So the first thing we're going to do is draw out the river, and it's just very simple, squiggly little lines really. And you just go along the edge. What we're going to do is just put in some blue first in the water in the river. As you can see the reference material above here. That's what we're going to be doing. So we get started now. We get the paint on the brush. We're using a nice flat brush, I believe, here. And the line around is my border. I use that to test my color before I put it on the painting. And we're using a mop brush, actually, not a flat brush. And we're just pushing it all down into the river, keeping it nice and moist. We're going to put a green layer on the bottom and mix them together, as you see right here. And the mixing together is pretty straightforward. We just keep pushing it on, pushing the colors together, because you're trying to get a nice soft glow. So it doesn't look like it's a line of differentiation. It's combined together into one unit. And once we get down to this stage, we can switch over actually to just water, and that'll help blur the center of it all up, nice and even. Now, next we'll put a base coat of beige, and that's just to hide all the white areas in case when you're flipping through doing watercolor, you have a tendency to have white paper show through where you don't want it. So I always put a base coat down just to take care of that problem. And the watercolor essentially is a layers medium. Everything is done in layers, so you build your painting up. So as you can see here, we don't just paint the bushes right off the top. I typically put in a base layer, and then I come back and I add to it and keep adding until I'm done by painting. A little darker there, darker in the foreground makes it more interesting. It draws you into the painting, and it works really well that way. I use a paper towel to mop up some of the drippings. Mixing up some green. I believe this is sap green. Start putting in some of the side of the stuff on the side of the embankment, and mix that in with a little bit of burnt sienna as well. Get some nice browns in there. What we're doing here is we're pointing to all these scrub on the side of the bank, the little reeds and stuff like that. Mostly scrub. Put in a bit of green here. It's still wet, so it'll blend together nicely. And as you can see, the brush stroke throws in some of the shrubbery along the bank. And you sort of you dip your brush in there and you go whip it up and down, and it gives you that sense of shrubs. Just mixing up some more color to put in here to make it all come together. And going into the background trees and bushes. And build it out over the top of the curve in the curve in the river. Just again, we're building up the landscape here. The palette is pretty simple, really blues and greens mostly. And that gives a nice sense of, nature. I'll be using the rigger brush soon to bring this more to life. Right now I'm whipping up the scrub area, make it look more natural. A little darkness now. This is where it starts to come alive. I want to differentiate the embankment up there to make it stand out more. That is going around a corner. That's the whole point we're trying to get across here. And you speed up these training videos on purpose to cover more ground in less time. Otherwise, the video would last into 30, 40 minutes. And YouTube doesn't like them that big. So I keep them to a modest number and try to take more use of your time. And I don't think it hurts, and you can still gather what I'm doing. This brush I'm using here is called a rigger brush, and it's a long-haired, skinny brush, but it's great for doing short little lines, trees, grasses, stuff like that. Here we go. We're attaching the landscape to the water. We're going to be doing the reflection of the bushes in the water soon to give you the total effect of how this is going to come together. And this takes a bit of bravery. If you're not used to painting, you may be a little nervous to jump right in there with some dark color like what I'm doing right now. A lot of people find it very hard to get over. Now, essentially what I'm doing here is I'm putting some green below the surface of the water so that when I paint around it, it won't be, again, it won't be the color white or anything showing through. It'll be, the lily pads or whatever that could be, algae, stuff like that, the green areas. Dampen up the puddles a little bit. And we'll be mixing up a hooker's green with probably a little bit of indigo. Get this all together. The tones are nice. What you want to do here is squint your eyes when you look at the painting, and you can start to see distinct areas. If the tones were too close, it would all blend together into one big tone, and it would be very boring to look at because the values are weak. But in this case, I try to keep everything nice and strong so that I can create more dynamic effect, more interesting palette, more interesting scenery. And one thing that you recognize the fact too that we're not painting the picture to be exactly like the picture. Otherwise, just take a photograph and be happy with it. We put our own sense into it, our own meaning, our own our own style. And so this painting ends up looking like how I want it to look. It's a good rendition. It's influenced by the photograph that we're using. But I always tell my students, ignore the photograph, just be influenced by it, but nothing more than that. So here I'm coming in with the reflections now with the indigo and hooker's green. And the areas that aren't colored, as you can see in the photograph, is where the light comes through and it dances on the water a little bit. All the strokes are more or less horizontal, in keeping with how water falls anyway. Again, I'm trying not to go for solid color. I'm molding it in or dancing it in a little bit. It looks like I'm just, guessing what I'm doing here, but there's a method to my madness. I have a pretty good idea how it's going to work out. So don't be, if you're copying along the way with me here, or when you do it later, just be bold. Make all your strokes on purpose. Don't try to make it too messy, because there's a reason for it. Everything has to have a sensibility to it, so that it's real, and the painting looks believable. But it's a form of impressionism, of course. We're not doing high detail. There's people out there, friends of mine who do high detail, and I tell you, they can make this thing look like exactly like what we show in the photograph. Whereas I'm the opposite. I'm going with more of a loose style. And as you can see, the parts we left on the bottom right-hand corner there, that's what we're painting. The areas we're leaving alone show the green coming through that we put in initially there. So as you can see, it's almost completely covered up, but the parts that are exposed are the light green that we put on prior to doing the dark. A lot of the reflection of the grass is in the water. Keeping the darkness coming. As you notice, the darker we make that bottom corner, the more inviting the painting is. It draws you in. And that's really the whole point of this. Put some corresponding darkness up in the background there. You're always adding layers of watercolor. You would have thought we were all done that area. But no, you keep going back and you keep adding more values and zones to make the piece come alive and make it all balance out as well. Throw some solid greens in there and they reflect everything. This is what we call flicking. Flicking some paint into the scene, loosens it up a little bit. Throw in the green, make sure the greens flow. We're pretty close to done. Do some fine tuning here. Fine tuning with a rigger brush. You use your finger too. That's your finger is one of your best tools. Throwing in some more rays in the water. It's like I'm writing a story. Always one more thing to touch up. But you get a good sense of land and water and how they work together. Always something to do, always something to do. I'm just looking it over now to see if there's any more I have to touch up before we close out. Those white highlights. I use white gouache in the case of all my highlights. It's a mixture of watercolor and acrylic, and it comes up very dense white. It's a fantastic white for highlighting, and I highlight it just with everything I do. And again, adds more interest. Brings a bite. If you put it in the water, it adds a real bright spot. Where the sun's dancing off the water. Just getting some more paint on my brush. Getting some of that algae into the water. It's not a white anymore. Mix it with a little bit of green so it would look like moss or algae. And again, some final spray with the white gouache. Again, it adds sparkle to the water. And I splatter pretty much everything. Even if I'm doing snow, I'll splatter the colors I've used plus colors I haven't used. Like I could throw a red splatter in. And it really doesn't ruin the painting at all. It just adds a bit more interest, something more going on to our little story here. And that's pretty much about it. We're ready to close off. And we're just looking at things here, figuring out any more what to do. But I think we're pretty much wrapped. Thanks for coming out.